Hello to you, my name is Maria Kądzielska and this is Poland Daily Culture in the middle of pandemic. You cannot go to the theater or to the cinema, that's why we are talking about culture and today philosophy. Here with me is Michał Rzeczycki, a PhD candidate at Warsaw University. Thank you very much for being with us.
You're welcome.
And since I know you specialize in Polish political thought.
Yes, exactly. My research field is 16th century Polish political thought.
16th century.
Yes, precisely.
Many years ago, did we even write in Polish those texts, or are they all in Latin?
This was the time when a Polish writer shifted from Latin to the Polish language. Few writers even were promoted to noble status because of their achievements in Polish literature.
So it was a time when Polish language and Polish literature really counted, especially for those in power.
Exactly. I mean, this was precisely the time when in many other countries, because of the Renaissance, national languages became much more popular than using Latin. Of course, Latin was still a lingua franca among all other nations of Europe. But in Poland, Polish literature experienced a kind of revival.
So if this didn't happen, we would right now probably speak Latin.
Probably yes. Our literature would be much poorer and began to develop much later.
So what is the specificity of Polish political thought?
I don't think that we can talk about Polish political thought in terms of its originality. The paradigm of thinking was the same, the arguments were similar as in the classics, I mean Aristotle and Cicero. But what was new were the historical circumstances. Polish writers adapt classical political thought, ancient political thought, and transform it in such a way that they can describe their own position, their own circumstances, their own state.
And the situation of the state was a personal union between Poland and Lithuania?
Not yet. The precise data was 1569. But because of economic changes, religious arguments, and the case of union, this was a very dynamic period. When we have such a dynamic period, it is very easy to have much deeper understanding of political thoughts. It's something that makes you thinking about what is the proper form of government, what kind of laws we should have, and so on.
So they were reading Cicero and Aristotle, as you mentioned.
Yes.
And both of those, especially Aristotle, is writing about the perfect state, or I mean the Republica in a form, but it always limited to, I would say, state-city, so with limited numbers of citizens. And of course, in the situation of Poland in those times, which it was much bigger than the ancient Athens. So how did they want to adapt the thought to different circumstances after all?
The basic mean, I think, was the medieval concept of representation.
Representation.
Parliament's representation, because parliament isn't an entirely modern, I mean contemporary instrument. The basic rules of parliamentary government were developed in the medieval times inside the church. Local congregations had to argue and decide what kind of what is the state rate of taxation that those congregations owned to Rome, to the Apostolic See. This way of thinking were now, after that, were transferred to political thinking, to arguments between the monarchs and the peoples. And thus it came also to Kingdom of Poland and then to the Grand Duchy of Lithuania. So this was this basic meaning of taking ancient thoughts and putting it into new context. Because now we have local communities, smaller communities, like those ancient states, but now those communities were represented by envoys at the Assembly of Parliament.
Well, very democratic, I would say.
Partially democratic, because I don't want to say that it was a fairy tale and everybody was included. No, of course, only nobility was included.
Which was around 15%?
Not so much. In Mazovia region, yes, it was quite populous, and there were a lot of knights that were in their social status no much different than peasants.
But still with a right to vote.
Yes, everybody who had a coat of arms had the right to vote. Right to, and after 1572, they had also a right to elect a king.
I would say unique situation when it comes to countries, or not so unique.
Yes and no, if you forgive the expression. At this present moment, when the Union of Lublin is decided, the situation is not as much different comparing to other countries. It was becoming different towards the 17th century. If we speak, for example, about royal prerogative in Poland, Sigismund August had a quite huge power, which was comparable to power, for example, Elizabeth I. And the English kings also have been limited by the Parliament. So it wasn't very different, though some specific differences were, and they were the reason why those two paths, Western and the path of Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, were spreaded.
And we will talk about these reasons in the next episode, and also about the Union of Lublin. If that interests you, keep watching us, and thank you very much for turning on Poland Daily Culture.